Hey everybody, welcome to Facts and Foolishness. It's your favorite auntie, Auntie Joy, your co-host here, the one that's always got your back, along with that favorite uncle that's gonna make everybody laugh at the cookout, at the Thanksgiving dinner, because you see him already getting ready to get started.
That's because you wanted to say crazy Uncle Kev.
But you wouldn't have said it for me, so I don't have to now.
That's all right. I'm used to it now. Yeah, I'm the crazy uncle. That's right. Just don't lock me in the basement. That's all I ask. We got a good show today, Joy. Why don't you tell the people what we're looking at? What we look forward to hearing today.
We are going to have some amazing guests on talking about police misconduct across these United States of ours.
Right.
We know that's a big deal. It's a big deal here. A lot of people are subjected to some really harsh treatments, especially people of color, especially Black people. We walk out the door in fear, wondering, do we have to watch out for bad guys, cops? Who do we have to watch out for today? And if we need the police, are they actually going to help us as the person in need? Or are they automatically going to assume we're the perpetrator? So, and what happens when once that interaction has occurred with the any police here in the U.S., are we safe if we're innocent or are we not? And how do we protect ourselves? How do we survive it mentally, physically? It's a lot of questions that we have to try and prepare ourselves for every time we walk outside the house. So we want some people to talk to us about that today.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this discussion today, Joy. We're going to get some good information. As usual, we have some amazing guests. It's going to be a fantastic discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to you to bring our guest in.
We have with us today Marcus A. Ross, attorney at law. And we have Dr. Michael Sinclair, PhD, LCSW. We're going to start off with Dr. Sinclair.
Good afternoon, Uncle Kev. Good afternoon, Auntie Joy. It's a pleasure to be here today. I can't wait to meet your amazing guests that you're talking about. I can't wait to meet who they are. But thank you for the introduction.
Welcome. We're happy to have you.
My name is, again, Dr. Michael M. Sinclair, and I've been an associate professor at the Morgan State University, HBCU, for over the last decade. I have been teaching social work for close to 30 years right now. I've taught at various universities. But my entry into the field and my interest into police misconduct really started as a teenager. Really was when I witnessed, actually in the day of my prom, I witnessed something that really resonated with me. It was one of these incidents where I was in a community, predominantly white community, and there was an interaction, an altercation between some white young men, and they were getting ready to go at it with bats and chains and knives, and they called the police, and I was a witness to this. So I stepped aside because it had nothing to do with me. And when the police arrived, they initially interrogated me, and they initially came to me while these young white men were still fighting. They were asking what was my involvement in it, and I was like, I have nothing to do with this. I'm just getting my tuxedo. And I realized that there was some disparity and some different in the way that I was being approached and almost accused of being involved in some violence when it was clearly people from not my community that were involved in the violence. It stuck with me, and I realized that there was something larger that was brewing in our country, and this was pre-Rodney King. We're talking about the mid '80s. I started working after college in a program with young fathers in New York. And one of the things that I noticed was I noticed that there was some common denominator with young fathers, particularly young fathers of color. Many of them had interface with the police community and negative interfaces with the police community. That led me to start a post-institutional program for young men who were incarcerated, previously incarcerated, to help them with the re-assimilation back into the community. I've done that work for almost 30 years. I currently still work with returning citizens that have returned from incarceration. And one of the stories that I hear far too often is how police have mishandled or have did things to them that violated their human rights, much less their civil rights. So let's talk a little bit more about this. What I see is that the African American community and communities of color have a strained relationship with police. I want to emphatically say that not all police are bad, not all police are corrupt. I have some very good friends who are in law enforcement that really take their job very seriously, and they are one of the good ones. However, we have to address the issue with those police officers who are violating young people. And I'm particularly interested in young people and young people of color. About 3 years ago, Natasha Pratt Harris and colleagues invited me to participate in a book called, shameless plug, Why the Police Should Train, why the police should be trained by Black people. So let me talk about some of the facts that I know of. First of all, one of the things that I think is important is that a study was done about 10 years ago at University of Albany that really stated that maybe 60%, 57% actually white people see the police officers as honest and kind and a resource in the community, as opposed to less than 30% of African Americans. African Americans perceive the police department very differently. The police department is not considered one of their friends for a myriad of reasons. The first reason is that oftentimes the police have negative interactions with the Black community. If you are involved in child abuse or neglect, it's the police officers that come to remove the perpetrator, and sometimes that perpetrator is a family member. It's the police officers that knock on your door and interrogate your family members that are in urban poor communities. So they really, from a very young age, many young people are taught to stay away from police officers. And this is unfortunate because police officers are there to serve and protect, but oftentimes they are seen as alien invaders, poor communities. Oftentimes they don't look like us. They are from another community and they come into our community only when there's a problem. So they're not there at the baseball games and the football games and community gatherings. They're often there only to investigate. And there's some truth to that. Police officers have historically over-surveilled poor communities. And I think Auntie Joy had mentioned this earlier. What do we need to do in order to reduce police brutality and police misconduct? Well, there's a simple answer. You have to have lots of money. Period. If you have lots of money, and you live in affluent communities, the likelihood that the police are going to over monitor you is going to be less likely. Now, I say that facetiously, but really, the legal system has a lot to do with what's going on in poor communities. So, one of the things that I want to talk about is that police need to be trained by people who live in the community. I believe that we should have more civilian review boards. I believe that a part of their training in order to interact with the community needs to involve the community. You can't really have people who are outside the community talking about cultural sensitivity training, because it really doesn't land well with many police officers. Many police officers who attend these cultural sensitivity training are doing so because they're mandated by their superior. They're not engaged in this process. But I believe that there's an opportunity to really help professionalize police even more. When I say professionalize police more, many of the police officers often have a 2-year degree or 60 credits at a community college. Let's raise the expectations. If they have the opportunity to use their discernment to see if a person should be killed, we really should expect that they should be well trained and well educated on a plethora of things. We shouldn't have police officers with only 60 credits, and 60 credits in random, 60 random credits. So not necessarily in criminology or sociology or social work, but 60 credits. So I believe that that expectation should be higher. I also believe that the police departments across the country have become over militarized. We have police officers who are coming with AK-47s and M16s into the urban community as if this was a third world country. That really speaks volumes of how young people perceive the invading force of the police officers. I think that, when police officers, and I'm thinking about Michael Brown, they came in with tanks, and that's unheard of in civilized country, to come in with tanks into the community to really stop a riot. So things have to change. The strained relationship has to change, but it begins with interaction, positive interactions, and creating opportunities for positive interactions. I could go on a little bit more, but let me just leave you with one experience I had when I had the opportunity to do a ride along with some police officers. I was in a ride along, and the police officers, as they toured urban community. And one of the things that stuck out to me is, as we moved past the bodega, the police officers looked at some young African American children hanging out in front of the bodega, and they said, "Look at this." They ran around the block and they came up and they pulled up on the curb. And one officer looked to the other and said, "Watch them run like roaches." And I was like, "What?" And some of the young people started to disperse when they saw the police officers actually pull up on the curb. The police officers then started to ask the young people, "What are you doing? Where should you be? Get out of here." And one young person looked back at the officer and says, "Listen, I'm a customer and I'm not going to move." Now, at that particular point, the situation went south, because that young person was in his right to be in front of that establishment and to use that establishment. But that police officer interpreted that defiance as you're trying to overpower me, or you're trying to take control of the situation. So the police officer had to exert more force and started pushing the young person. And the young person says, listen, until I commit a crime, you have no right to move me. Now, just to give you a little bit more context, people around were looking at this young person. He must have been about 17 years old. People were in the window looking at this young person, recording this police officer, and this police officer lost his edge and lost his temper. And this is one of these situations where it got real bad real quick. And the police officer realized that if he didn't take a stand right now, other people would challenge his authority. And he was abusing his authority. And so he actually handcuffed the young person, and the young person had nothing to lose, but did do nothing. But he was ran to the police system, handcuffed, and said that he was disturbing the peace, when actually was the police officer who actually exacerbated that situation that could have been de-escalated really quickly. I spoke to those superiors at that time, and they said, well, this was an isolated incident. But time and time again, we see that that's not an isolated incident. Officers often misuse their power because they see African Americans and poor people as potential threats and not community citizens and taxpayers. And that's something that we have to challenge our officers to see our citizens as citizens. So I'm going to leave it there. There's much more that I want to discuss, but I just want to share with you that this is a part of a bigger problem in our country.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sinclair. I think you hit on some very, very important topics, especially with that experience that you had in your ride-along. It's what so many people experience, and what a lot of other people who don't look like any of us here today have no idea happens on the regular, or think that it doesn't happen as often as it does. And each of us has an experience where we could tell, or experiences, plural, where we could tell of something like that has happened. So again, thank you so much. Very, very important information. I hope everyone saw that book title. Get out there and read it. And we look forward to talking to you some more about this a little later on. Thank you again.